Hi, this is Kerry Saint, and this is Mad About Adoption. Okay, today we're going to talk about a bit more about the adverse effects and harmful effects of adoption upon the adoptee, and we will talk about the mothers as well, though I'm not a mother, I am an adoptee. Okay, so from the 1950s to the 1980s here in Australia, it is estimated over 250,000 non-Indigenous children were stolen from their biological mothers and families. It is proven through the Senate report that was a result from the federal inquiry that illegal and unethical and criminal practices occurred in the taking of babies from their mothers. Now, I am one of those that was taken unethically and unlawfully. My mother was threatened and coerced to give me up. She was told by social workers of the day that if she did not relinquish me, not only would I be taken, but my 4 older brothers would be taken as well. So my mother was threatened and basically had a gun put to her head. And she doesn't quite understand that because she feels that she made a choice, yet I have it in writing the exact story that occurred as to the reason I was adopted. If she was left alone, I would have been raised by my mother, and I would have grown up with my brothers, and I certainly wouldn't have been forced to work in charcoal pits and be beaten and abused on almost a daily basis of my life. And I wouldn't be sitting here today jumping up and down about a form of forced adoption, and I certainly wouldn't be jumping up and down about adoption in general. But hey, come on, Australia, you did this to me, and so I'm having a voice. I don't like being adopted. I hated it, and I don't understand why, I don't seem to fit into your fairy tale that adoption is supposed to be this wonderful thing. And I'm sorry, but it's not this wonderful thing. It's traumatic. It's life destroying. It is lifelong. It has consequences that generate right into your life and impacts upon your children and your grandchildren. It affects your relationships, particularly with your husband, and like you're forever having to check yourself in what you say. You're not allowed to tell your adoptive parents that you're unhappy about being adopted. You have to continually pretend that everything's hunky-dory and suppress of your feelings and emotions of being adopted. Now, we know that there are adopted people that went to loving homes. And sadly enough, that's all the media want to pick up on. And all they want to pick up on is that you were treated well by your adoptive parents and you went on a journey to find your biological family, and they're really the only stories they want to cover. Now, the movie Lion pretty well hits the nail on the head when it comes to telling our stories of adoption. You have one man that, eventually has all these flashback memories of when he was a little boy, and he works out that, remembered where he lived in India, and he was able to track down his biological mother and family by Google Earth. But what's really sad about his story, because they pump it up, and it's also wonderful that he finds his natural mother and family, and, the biological parents are along for the journey. But that's not the case in nearly all adoptions. Very few, if any, adoptive parents are really keen for you to find your biological family at all and support you through that journey. And, in the movie Lion, there's another tragic story, which is the typical story of adoptees, and that's of the brother who just didn't cope being adopted. He was already traumatized as a child. And of course, subsequently, because there was no continued counselling and support for him and helping him to cope with the trauma of separation from his biological family, his culture and his heritage. And as loving as the adoptive parents were, this is so typical of adoptees. And this is the more extreme, where this gentleman ends up taking drugs and alcohol to cope. That's the real story of adoption, everybody. Seriously. And what's the sad thing is that the movie makers could have covered his story. Tragic as it was, but it's the truth. It's not this fairy tale. You get adopted by beautiful people and you get to connect with your biological family and we all play happy families. I'm sorry, it doesn't happen like that. You know, if it does, it's so few and far between, it's not funny. It's like finding a needle in a haystack to get those sort of results. I've tried to contact my mother, and I did have a brief relationship with her, but 3 times it broke down because the trauma for her is still so great, and the trauma for me is so great. And being abused like I was, it was very, very difficult to work through my emotional feelings and, how to process what had happened to me against what was going on for her. And I had no idea she'd been forced to give me up. I had no idea of the trauma and impact upon her. So each time, I tried so hard to have a relationship with her, it just kept breaking down. And it took me over 20 years to tell her that I had been abused by my adopted family, and she just didn't cope with it. She said, no, that can't be true at all. Adoptive parents don't abuse their children, and she was in total denial. And, for me to get to the point of over 20 years, because I was terrified, I was absolutely terrified of hurting her and, to shatter all the hopes and dreams that she obviously had for me. She was told that I would go off and have this wonderful life that she could not provide for me. And so she lived on that hope. Whilst I was separated from her, she raised her 4 boys successfully. And I suppose in the back of her mind, she often thought about me, but she was thinking, wow, she can't be with me, but she's gone off and she's going to have the life I can't give her. So you can imagine how shattering it was for me to tell her that that wasn't the case. I never got into how tragic my childhood was because of her initial response. And it really did something for me to see her response. And I found it hard to have a relationship with her after that. There was just this huge wall between us. It was like this silent, deafening trauma that stood between her and I, because at that point she had never ever gotten help about what had happened to her, and I was getting very minimal help, and I wasn't getting the correct help because nobody had been trained on the issues of forced adoption. That's only occurred since our federal apology in 2013, and only 2,000 professionals have actually been trained on former forced adoption and its effects. So, it's a huge issue. More should be done, more education of our professional counsellors, our psychologists and our psychiatrists, but it's just not being done. So this is the situation that we're in, and sadly I'm hearing that there's now an inquiry happening at the moment that's been announced about adoption and in Australia. So I would ask any adoptee that suffered mistreatment, abuse and suffered trauma by being adopted, please get involved in this inquiry. It's set up by the government, And you can get online and see about this on the government site about this inquiry. So I encourage you to do so. If you do not believe that adoption is the right answer for many, many children in this country, that we should be working more on helping families stay together and to get the help they need, then please get involved. We know that our government pays between $40,000 and $160,000 a year plus to keep a child in foster care. Now, why is that money not spent in helping families stay together? So now New South Wales has this huge amount of numbers of children who've been taken into care. They tell the parents to go get help. They give them 6 to 12 months to get their act together, if not the kids taking the care and being forced to be adopted out. That goes against everything that our federal government and state government said to us when they said that they would not bring back forced adoption. Well, I'm sorry, Australia, it's happening. And if you don't get on board and understand what's really going on, it just could be your child that's taken, your grandchild, your niece or your nephew. So you really need to be aware of what is going on in this country, and it certainly isn't to keep biological families together. It's to create discord within the family unit, to remove children for very little offences. They're even removing children from parents who have been in care. They haven't even harmed their child. It's on the pretext that you may harm your child because, hey, we screwed you up in the first place taking you and putting you in foster care or an institution, and now we deem you unfit to be a parent. Doesn't matter that you've done something they haven't done anything to that child. They're going to take your child just because you've been in care. If you get on the New South Wales government site for, their reasons for removing a child, some of it can be so petty. It's a messy yard, it's a broken gate, it's leaving your child unattended for a brief period of time. We've got parents complaining their child was taken because they actually asked for help. They asked for help because they're having family issues and problems and they need assistance. I kind of thought that family services meant family services, meaning to serve the family. But in a lot of instances, this isn't happening. They're serving themselves to your child, taking it, putting it in foster care, making a lot of money, and now they want to make a lot of money in seeing these children adopted. So that's the news for you today. And I need to make these videos short, so I'll be doing a number of these. So this is number 3. Stay tuned because I'm going to start to give you some statistics. So this is Kerry Saint, mad about adoption and what the truth is and what you're not being told. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.